Know Your Worth. This is our workshop about strategies and best practices for job offer evaluations and negotiations. I'm Kristin Staunton, and I think I recognize most of you, but I'm one of the Dietrich College career consultants. And Katie, I'll let you introduce yourself.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. My name is Katie Flanagan, and I am the other Dietrich career consultant. So good to see a couple familiar faces and look forward to our chat today.
Yeah, and before we show you our planned agenda, I just wanted to start by asking you all, what brought you here this evening? So what do you hope to gain from this presentation? If it's just general knowledge about this topic, that's fine. But if you do have specific questions or things that you want to make sure that we cover, please feel free to unmute yourself, introduce yourself, throw it into the chat. We'd love to hear, what some of your concerns are before we get started.
I can start. I'm currently on the job market, and I have 2 pending offers. So I guess I just want to learn some strategies to advocate for myself.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Congrats.
All right. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Something from the chat?
Looks like in the chat, interested in initial conversations about salary during the hiring process, which we'll definitely cover. Someone agree with that. Understanding how to push back if initial negotiation strategies fail. When job applications say, what's your expected salary? What do you put? How to advocate for yourself. How pay can be negotiated with remote positions. Yeah, definitely becoming more common, Ellie.
Yeah, so we're going to definitely touch on a lot of these points. We'll try to remember to hit the ones that we haven't planned to talk about, but we'll have time for an official Q&A at the end. So if we don't answer your question, please bring it up again. All right, so with that, let's go ahead and, my disclaimer first. So I have to say that this information is not legal advice, so please don't interpret it as such. And I apologize, I used to be in HR, I just need to say this. If you happen to get an offer that has a lot of legalese, let's say part of the offer is an NDA or a non-compete, first always come to us, because I will say you usually don't need a lawyer every time you get an offer. But sometimes if we can't help you to understand the language, you may. And so just, keep that in mind, that this is general advice, not official legal advice. All right, and so let's just start by talking about what a job offer process will look like. So usually the offer is going to arrive by phone. So the recruiter will call you, congratulations, we want to make you an offer. And they'll typically give you, the general high level terms. So your title, your salary, possibly when they'd like you to start. And then they'll tell you that they're going to follow up by sending you an official offer letter, which these days almost always comes via email. So it's rarely actually mailed anymore. Usually in this conversation or in that letter, there's going to be a deadline established. So they'll either say to you, would like to get your response within 48 hours. It may also be written in that formal letter. And at that point, if you know right away that deadline is not going to work for your timeline, you can try to negotiate that on the spot. However, you don't have to, and we'll get into those details a little more later in the presentation. That deadline, however, I will say, starts from the time you receive the full offer. So a lot of recruiters will try to tell you that you have 48 hours from that phone call, but that's something you really want to push back on, because you can't make an informed decision without knowing all of the terms, all of the benefits. So you need to have that full offer before the actual timeline starts ticking. I would say on average, what we're seeing from employers is that they are giving students anywhere from, I'm going to actually change this, it's anywhere from 48 hours to a week. We do have policies in place to help you push back on that, because it really is a short period of time, especially if you get that offer in the fall. But that's, you know, what we're seeing that employers are trying to negotiate with you. And then keep in mind that you can continue to interview, you can continue to apply to jobs until you've accepted an opportunity. And again, we'll get into that policy a bit later in the presentation.
All right, so let's break down the verbal versus the written offer pieces and how to approach those. So some of you, maybe in the past or in the future, will get these exciting and nerve-wracking feelings when you get that call and you have your adrenaline rushing and you don't remember all the things that they said, which is not helpful. So the biggest note is to take notes. So you want to know exactly what they're putting on the table, because those are the things that you can perhaps negotiate down the line. If you need to get clarification and ask again, then that's totally fine too. You want to make sure you know everything that matches. And of course, that will come in the written piece as well. So some of you might already have done your research and know exactly what the salary offer is going to be, what the starting date is going to be, and you might negotiate at this point. Or it's totally normal to share your initial reactions and have that time to wait, as Kristin mentioned, especially if you do have competing offers, or maybe you're waiting to hear back from another organization or company. So make sure, again, that you clarify whatever that response deadline is, and of course, the compensation expectations of that. You can and should ask for the offer in writing, even if they say it verbally and it sounds amazing. So that way you have the documentation to back it up for whatever reason that you might need in the future. And this could be something that you could say, I'm excited to talk over this with my family if they're involved, or I'm excited to talk about this and review the offer. Can you send me an email that documents everything we discussed today? So it can be as simple as that to get yourself started. Next.
Sorry, I'm trying. I'm not sure why it's not advancing. There we
That's
go.
okay. All right. So written side, just to kind of reflect some of the earlier points I made. So acknowledge that you received the offer, but use non-committal language. So there are some people, like I said, when you get that call, you're like, oh yeah, I accept. You know, take a minute to pause, breathe. But on a written offer, you know, you don't have that perhaps same adrenaline rush. So just use this as an opportunity to say, you know, thanks for sending this offer, and I'm going to review the information. Provide a date, or in a lot of cases, they're going to provide that date for you. If you do need additional time, make sure that you respond back promptly anyway, to ask for that additional time. Make sure that you know all the things that are involved in this offer. So if there are questions that you want to write down and follow up with, that's great. If you feel like it's something that's really detailed, don't play back and forth emails with the hiring manager. Sometimes it's easier just to set up a time to chat on Zoom or perhaps a phone call. So a lot of times when you're doing negotiations, they tend to be over the phone. All right, so just as I guess a claim, your first job may not be your dream job, and that's okay. You know, you're getting your footing, and once you have your footing, it can be easier to do your job search and have that ability to be a little bit more choosy. So ask yourself, can I be happy in this role for at least 1 year, and will it help me get to that next step or that next position? So just kind of bear that in mind as you're going along.
Okay, so when you're evaluating your offer, it's not just about salary. And, I may be stating the obvious, but I do think it's worth mentioning that there are other factors that can be really important to think about. These are some of them. I won't read you the whole list, but things like, is this organization a fit for me culturally? Do I want to be in a large organization or a small organization? Where do I want to live? That's a big one. And is the cost of living in wherever this job is offered, is it aligned with the salary? Am I going to be able to live in that city? Work-life balance, flexibility, remote work. These are all things that are often just as important as salary and benefits. And this is just a sample sort of worksheet that you all can use. You can use it if, like Nuria, you have multiple offers, just to sort of check off what offer A has in comparison to offer B. You may want to give certain factors different weights. So if salary is the most important thing to you, maybe salary gets 5 points and paid vacation gets 1 point, and then you add up all the points. So there's a couple different ways you can use this, but I do think it's helpful to kind of have everything in front of you when you're comparing offers. And so just a little exercise now. We have here just 2 scenarios. So employer 1, really large, fairly conservative, very stable, excellent benefits, opportunities to travel, multiple office locations. And then we have employer 2, which is a much smaller company, but seems to be a bit more casual, more events, maybe more flexibility, more vacation, but only 1 office location. So, think about it for a few seconds. And then, if anybody wants to kind of unmute and just share which of these would be preferable to you and kind of what your thought process is as you're, making that decision.
For me, the multiple locations aspect of employer 1 is a big thing because my partner will probably be pretty bound to a certain location, so me being flexible would be great. And excellent benefits is very important, good healthcare, all that. So I would probably lean toward employer 1.
Awesome, thanks, Patience. Yeah, and I'll also say that, your values may change over time too. It may be that employer 1 it is right for you when you're, thinking of starting a family, or you have a partner, who has certain responsibilities. Or it could be that like you're really well established in your career and you don't need any of those. You don't need the stability anymore and you just want to have fun. So your values may change, but and it's also possible that you're not going to hit all of your values in 1 offer, and you may have to let's sort of give and take a little bit. So let me just see what someone put in the chat. So yeah, conservative, to be honest with you, I didn't really define that really well when I wrote it, but maybe it could be politically, but it could also be in terms of things like dress code. So, having to dress formally versus, coming in a t-shirt and shorts. But yeah.
Okay. So a couple things to think about before you negotiate. And one that I'll add to this list is before you negotiate, know what your values are, in fact. Kristin, can we jump back up to that slide 3 slides ago? The one with the top 10? Okay. So one other exercise that I think is helpful at this point, and you might even think of things that aren't on this particular list, but take a minute and rank what you feel are your top 3 values or things that you would want to consider in a role, and feel free to write them in the chat. Okay. Having trouble choosing. Yes. So sometimes depending on what Kristen just said, like where you are in this time in your life, it might be a little more difficult to choose. But sometimes when if you have past work experiences, you might know like, oh, that had no work-life balance. So I know that this is a priority in the future. Um, so sometimes it's just based on previous situations or contexts that you have. Right. And yeah, if you don't know in general what the organizational health is, yeah, might be helpful when you are interviewing and going through the process to talk to other folks who work at that organization or company to get a good sense of that. Because they might be a little more candid than the hiring manager in some of those cases. So that might be a way to dig into that a little bit further. And sometimes too, you can see reviews. We're going to look at Glassdoor a little bit later on, but reviews can be helpful for those types of things as well. But yeah, looks like we have a nice mix there too. Cool. Now we can jump back. Okay, beyond values. So know your worth. So, you know, you're grad students, you're going to be coming in with a master's degree, perhaps a couple years of experience if you were in the field first. So that automatically elevates you above a lot of other people. So know that those years of experience or the knowledge level will definitely give you an advantage in negotiations. The privileges, so what kinds of things can you negotiate? You just saw a list of some of the things to consider, but some of those things can also be things you can negotiate. Know what you can ask the recruiter about. Most things are pretty open. If they are trying to hide things, usually that's a red flag. And then know your responsibility. So what is the deadline in which you need to give them an answer? What's the protocol to follow through? Just so you're making sure that you're negotiating on fair terms. All right. So I just mentioned we have, and these the couple on the top here are public resources, free resources. Some might ask you to make a profile first, like Glassdoor and LinkedIn, but it still should be free regardless. And that gives you an opportunity to look at things like the cost of living, to know what your worth is in a particular area, for example, or you know what other salaries folks have reported, so that you know, okay, this might be a typical range for this type of role. So I'm gonna start sharing my screen real quick. All right. Maybe give a thumbs up when you see it. Okay, awesome. So we're seeing Glassdoor. So if you haven't been on Glassdoor before, it's a fantastic resource, like I said, to see and dive into more of the behind the scenes culture, if you will, of some companies. Usually bigger companies get more reviews, obviously, because there's more people, but you can also check out, you know, the salary information, what kinds of benefits places offer, for example. So we're gonna go with Google, for example. This is also a job board as well in most respects. But if we go to companies for Google instead of just salaries, it should pop up here. Or it's being slow for me. Okay. There we go. Okay. So when you look up a company in this company section, it should give you all the various subsections, which we'll look at salaries for right now. But there are sections for benefits, so you would know what types of things they've offered people in the past, reviews, so what's good about it, what's bad about it, you know, would they recommend it to somebody else, but also the types of jobs that company has. So I'm just going to click on salaries for Google here. And they usually separate it by general types. So I'm just going to click on data scientist, for example. So you can see typically a range. So depending on the years of experience when you're coming in, how long you've been at the company, you know, that can definitely vary. So it can be helpful, for example, to add years of experience that you have coming in to really get a better indicator of what a typical range could be. The fact that there is a high confidence listed here means that there has been a lot of salaries added to give you kind of the best amounts there. So 321 people have put in a data scientist salary in this case. You can also see some of the other additional pay pieces that could come along with that type of position. And again, the averages with each of those. You could also compare it with other places. So what a data scientist at Meta makes, for example, to see if you're actually being competitive with other companies. So this is just a real quick example, but feel free to search specific job titles as well, and that can help kind of narrow it down. The other thing that I'll show here, so on our site, we have a section on post-graduation outcomes. So this is what students have submitted to us after they graduated or about to graduate and where they're going. So you could narrow down by major to see what other people have done, but you can also see the salary amounts for certain roles if you click down to it specifically. And that, again, can be helpful to see what other people have done from CMU and bring that up in a negotiation comparison point. All right. That was super quick nutshell, but any questions on that? Or anything, Kristin, you want to add?
I would just add, you know, with Glassdoor, you know, it can really also help you evaluate some of those other factors, especially like organization fit. You know, there are a lot of reviews on Glassdoor, and most of them will be talking about something like leadership or culture or work-life balance. And, you know, you have to kind of keep in mind that people who are posting reviews tend to be like the ones who are not happy. So it's not necessarily a total picture, but it can, if you feel like you're having some like concerns or you get some red flags during the interview process, it can be helpful to go in there to see if there are other people who are saying the same things.
Yeah, I will say that Glassdoor has tried to balance that out a little bit by making you submit at least one of your previous work experiences. So whether that's positive or negative, so that gives you more access to their site. So just something to know about. But I'll let Kristin jump back into our slides. But so Glassdoor and the FDS information that you saw are just two of the resources. So you see LinkedIn does the same, some similar things as Glassdoor. And then if you're an international student, I would recommend checking out Going Global, because that can give you a better sense of the sponsorship history for salary information.
All right, so moving on to the knowing your responsibilities piece of the puzzle. So bringing up again our ethical job search policy, which I will throw into the chat. This is on our website for you to reference, and CMU does take it very seriously. So the job search policy primarily concerns the act of reneging on an employment offer. And what that means is that you accept an offer with one employer, you continue interviewing, you get another offer, and you accept that offer, and then decide to not accept the first offer. So the reason we take that so seriously is because it can potentially reflect poorly, not just on you, but also on the university. And so you can imagine if we had, multiple students doing that to one employer, that employer may very well say, I'm done recruiting at CMU. I can't trust your students to honor their obligations. And so that will hurt everyone. And so it's, I know it's a tough decision whenever you're in that position. And we always recommend that before you make a decision, make an appointment with us so that we can just talk through sort of the pros and cons of making that decision. In addition to the consequences that you'll face with the employer, which is essentially just, you're probably not going to get hired by that employer ever again. CMU does have our own consequences. So for a first offense, you would be removed from Handshake for your current semester and the next full semester. So if this happens in the fall, then for the rest of that fall and the following spring. We also will require you to meet with a senior academic official within your home college. So within Dietrich, it would probably be Sharon. And one final qualification with this is that, if you are going to do this, if you're going to renege on an offer, you want to talk to us, don't be afraid to schedule an appointment with us, because we are not the ones who are going to kind of, rat you out, so to speak. The employer, once you tell them of your decision, if they call our office, that's when the consequences kick in. So it's possible that if you're able to handle that conversation gracefully, that they won't call. And it really just depends on the employer. Most of them do. But if they don't call, then there are no consequences. But I will say that it's still, there are no consequences with the university. There are still the consequences with that employer. And then we have another policy that's kind of the opposite side of that same coin. I don't know why my slides don't advance. There we go. So, we don't just have a policy that we hold you to, we also have a policy that we ask employers to follow, because, we're recognizing that they are trying to push the deadlines up and make them earlier and earlier and earlier. And that's why, students are put in this awkward position of having multiple offers and not enough time to decide. So the policy that we ask employers to follow is here. This is also in that same place on our website. And essentially, it's that if you receive a return offer, and a return offer is an offer that results from a summer internship. So basically, they're asking you to return. The earliest that you would have to respond by is either October 15th or 3 weeks. So this is assuming you're getting the offer in the fall. So whichever of those timeframes is longer. For all other offers that are just regular offers, not return offers, it's November 15th or 3 weeks. So if you get an offer in the spring, like this semester, we ask that employers give you at least 3 weeks to decide. So we cannot force anyone to follow this policy, but we can strongly suggest it. And in your negotiations, when you're trying to negotiate a deadline extension, you should absolutely share this link with them and let them know that your university has this policy, and then politely ask if they might be able to honor it and give you, whatever that time frame is. If they say no, you have a couple options. You can either just make a decision in the time that they give you, or you can reach out to us and ask us to advocate on your behalf. If we do that, if we call the employer and they still will not budge, then what we do is we allow you to have those 3 weeks regardless. So you can accept that offer, continue interviewing with another company for another 3 weeks. And as long as you change your mind within that 3 week period, CMU will not punish you by enforcing those consequences. So if the employer doesn't hold up their end of the bargain, we're not going to expect you to hold up yours. I know that this is really confusing. It's confusing for us even at times. So I'll just give it a minute to sort of sink in. And then if there are questions, you know, I'll just take a pause and let you ask them. And I will say that this happens a lot. So I have a lot of appointments with students who are either deciding what to do because their deadlines are not aligning, or they've already decided to renege on an offer, and that's a difficult conversation. But it's something that is happening more and more often because these response times are getting shorter and shorter. All right, no questions? All right. Sorry, this is so serious. I hate like the consequences, but it's a fact. It's a reality, unfortunately.
Yeah, but I mean, our goal is to help you and feel supported in that process. So if you do need help writing that request for an extension too, feel free to make an appointment with us. But all right, now we're getting to the hot button topic, usually compensation. So, you know, you might get a call even before you are finished with the interviews about, you know, what are your salary expectations. You might get a call from HR, you might get a call from the person who's leading the hiring manager. So just be ready whenever that call comes. So the resources that we just showed you, like Glassdoor, or the salary information on LinkedIn, can be helpful to be ahead of the game. It's good to do the research even when you're applying. I know someone had asked if it's in the application, what do you put? There's multiple ways to approach this, and Kristin might have a different approach than I do. But if you can skip it, I would probably skip it. If you can't, you know, see if you can put a range in there. Every site is different, and some don't let you put in specific dashes or other things. So just see what's possible there first and foremost, because what they try to do is weed people out initially by that number, which isn't really fair if you're not doing your due diligence ahead of time to know, you know, what that range could potentially be. Because you definitely don't want to overshoot it. But if you undershoot it, then that's going to be a little more harmful to you. That being said, you can still negotiate a higher number later on in the process. So don't feel like you're stuck forever. Oh, a drop-down menu. Okay. So I guess again, research the typical average salary, and if that fits into a particular range, that might be helpful. But again, like I said, you're not completely stuck, especially if you find out, you know, as time goes on, that there's more expectations in the role than you realize. That might be a cause for negotiating for something higher. Same thing with, like, let's say you had a competing offer that's remote, and you're looking at a position that's in person, that costs to commute every day. You could add that into a negotiation offer as well. I think someone might have asked the reverse of that. But again, that can be based on your research, location, cost of living, all of those pieces put together. Oh, also size of company might make a difference in some of those questions too. So a nonprofit, even if it's the same title as a role between a small nonprofit and a bigger company, that doesn't mean that it's going to pay the same. That's typically how it goes with various organizations. But again, know your worth, know what you're getting into ahead of time. Hence the be reasonable on here. So don't just ask for 30,000 extra dollars just because you feel like it. You know, have the reason, have the research and the facts to back that up, why you deserve that and why it makes sense to them. And of course, if you're relocating as part of this, the cost of living, gas might be more expensive somewhere else, even though it's pretty high here. But you know, think about those things as well. And once you have looked through all these things, the research, you know, see if you do want to in fact negotiate. If you feel like it's a fair offer, you know, and you're happy with it, great. You know, if there are additional things beyond compensation that you want to negotiate, that's great too. Depending if it is something that's negotiable, and we'll chat about that. But yeah, as we kind of said earlier, your negotiation potential is tied to that range that you're putting out there. So just keep that in mind. So as long as you're preparing and being proactive, you're going to put yourself in a good spot.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, like just from being on the other side of this, you know, as a hiring manager or recruiter, with that question on the application, you know, they do screen people out, but only if you're really at the extremes. So like with that drop down box, it's not like if you don't pick the exact right answer, you're done. It's like if you are really at the low end or at low end, or really, really, really at the high end, like $100,000 more, then they may automatically screen you out. But if you are close enough and they really think you're a great candidate, they will have a conversation with you. Also, if it's over the phone and they say, oh, you know, great, what are your salary expectations? I always tell students to be honest with what you really want. You know, don't like undercut yourself. So say, you know, I'd be really excited for a salary in the range of 100 to 120. However, I am flexible for the right role. And that way you're kind of hedging your bets. But, you know, when you're first asked the question, be honest. What do you need? What do you want? What do you think you're worth? And then just add in that, you know, for the right reasons, you could be flexible.
Right. And that flexibility, you can say that it's negotiable based on benefits, you know, because that's the other piece of this too. All right. So beyond the base salary, you know, these are some of the most common things that folks will negotiate, depending on what's going on in your life situation. If you, let's say you're starting a family and you need some of that flex time to pick up kids from work, or pick up kids from daycare or from school, then, you know, that might be something to consider in there. The flex time remote work is definitely more common now as we're in this kind of hybrid society. But so some of them might already have that built in, but definitely ask, you know, as the pandemic is looking like it's winding down, will they keep those things? Is that something you're expecting ahead of time? So again, helpful to have things in writing to know what the expectation is. So some of you, if you have vacations, or maybe you're wrapping up another role, or you know, wrapping up school, obviously start dates can be negotiable. Parking, commuting costs, as we mentioned, in that balance between remote versus in person. Vacation time, depending on the size of company, might be a little bit easier versus another that has years of service built in with it. Tuition reimbursement might be for more educational based companies, but some others offer that as well. Relocation stipends, so helping you be able to move, signing bonuses and stock options. So you know, what can you, or when can you vest in the stock? and then special circumstances. So if you tell them ahead of time, again, this being proactive is important. If you tell them ahead of time, like I am taking a trip in January, and I know I won't have the time built up for paid time off. Is this okay? You know, typically if you let them know ahead of time, that's fine. True story. In my first position out of grad school, I negotiated time off because I was getting married within that same month. So life happens, and it's okay to, you know, make those things known. I don't think if you said I'm getting married, they'd say no, we don't want you because of that. So is it okay to say to an employer that you would like some time off after graduation? Yeah. I think self-care is important, and I think you don't even necessarily have to say what it's for. You can just say, I'd like to start at this particular date. But if they need a reason, you know, I think that's perfectly fine.
And Emma had a question too, about, would it be okay to counter a salary expectation question with, what would you typically pay for this role? And I think, you know, it's all about your tone, but I think you can say that. I mean, they may not answer it, but I think it's okay to say, well, you know, would you mind sharing with me what you might typically offer for this position? And they can say, well, it varies by experience. And, you know, I don't know where it would go, but I don't think it's too cheeky or rude if you ask it in a polite way.
Yeah, I've heard people ask, you know, what have you budgeted for this role? Which is a fair question to put out there. So I think that's okay to, again, give you a better sense of not underselling or overselling yourself. Any other questions? Okay.
All right, so, you know, getting into the actual like mechanics and the language of how do we do this, I'm gonna share a handout with you in a second that really lays it all out, but I think it's helpful to just kind of keep in mind, you know, what the employers are thinking about when an offer is made. You know, typically it's three things. You know, they're looking at the market overall. So, you know, what is, you know, how in demand is this position? How many qualified candidates are out there, and what are other companies paying for similar roles? Number two, they have to think of the salary of their current employees, and this can be tricky. So, you know, if they have a data scientist who's been with them for 10 years and who's, you know, maybe making, let's say, 150, it would be really hard for them to justify bringing a new grad in at a salary that's higher than what that person's making. And these are things that you'll never know, but sometimes when a company will have a strict salary band that they have to stay in for a particular position, that could be one of the reasons why. And then, you know, third is your qualifications. So, you know, if you do have special qualifications, which all of you do as grad students at CMU, use them. I mean, employers do care, and they're willing to pay for people who are bringing in these high demand skills. So that's kind of like just a sort of more holistic picture of the, I guess, the salary considerations from an employer side. And I'm going to pop out for just a second now. And show you a handout that we have, which I will put a link for in the chat. So this is in a Google Drive. You can all access it here. And all right, can you all see it now? Cool. Okay. So this just kind of outlines a lot of what we already talked about. So first, just kind of understanding, you know, the full picture of your responsibilities. Secondly, getting the offer, evaluating the offer, using the tools that Katie talked about. And then, when it comes to the negotiation process, you have a couple different options, right? So you can accept the offer as is. That's usually like best case scenario. And, keep in mind, you don't have to negotiate. If you do negotiate, it's always best if you have data points to back it up. But, if you don't have any data points, if the offer is higher than the average for your program, if it's higher than the averages you're finding on Glassdoor and LinkedIn, if you're satisfied with the benefits, don't feel like you have to enter a negotiation. But in that case, you'll want to ask some follow-up questions, make sure you know the start date, the onboarding process, any other documents I need to sign. If you do decide that you want to negotiate, we just wanted to provide you with a little bit of language in case you decide to do this, either over email or over the phone. I recommend trying to do negotiations over the phone if possible, but sometimes recruiters are just so hard to pin down that if it's time sensitive and you need to do it in an email, you can. So we talk about the sandwich technique, which just means that you start out with a really positive comment. I'm so excited about this position. However, after reviewing my university's outcomes, I learned that on average, students make $48,000 a year. I understand you're offering 35. Is there something that you could do to bring me a little closer to that average? And then again, sandwiching it with another piece of that positive bread. So that's the second scenario. Third scenario might be that you're okay with the salary, but you may want to negotiate the timeline. Or you don't want to negotiate the salary until you're sure you're going to accept the offer. And so that means you want to start by negotiating the timeline. So again, here's some language, using the terms of our offer policy for employers. And then lastly, if you're going to decline an offer, there's definitely a polite way to do that. Make sure you do it before the deadline. Try to do it over the phone rather than by email. And here's sort of a sample for you to use. We use this handout a lot with undergrads. I do realize that you all are totally capable of writing your own emails, and you may have language that's more sophisticated and lovely than mine. But if you need a template, here it is. And then finally, I just like to say, don't be nervous or feel like you're doing something wrong by negotiating. A lot of times I'll have students say, are they going to take the offer away if I try to negotiate? And the answer is no. Recruiters are so used to having these conversations. I would say that it's more common for students to try to negotiate something, whether it be deadline or salary, than to not negotiate. So don't feel like it's going to be taken away from you if you try. Unless you are incredibly disrespectful, which I don't think you would be, or you try to do something after the deadline has passed, then the worst that's going to happen is they say, no, I'm sorry, we're not flexible. And I think we had a question in the initial chat when we started the presentation about, like, what do you do if all of these strategies fail? That's a good question. And there are certain things that I would recommend. So we've been talking about negotiating salary primarily. And oftentimes, if there's one piece of the compensation package that's not negotiable, it is salary, for those reasons that we talked about. They just can't go above a certain amount because of the salary grades that other employees may already be at. So if they're not negotiable, they're not negotiable. And they'll tell you that. But you can always try to negotiate other pieces of the compensation package. So that means signing bonus, that means that could mean a performance bonus, that could mean equity, that could mean, things like vacation or, relocation expenses. But those other pieces, they usually have a lot more latitude and wiggle room to play with without having to go and ask for permission from, all the way up the chain of command. Because a bonus or a relocation expense is a one-time thing. It's not going to affect you. It's not going to stay with you for your time at the company. And so there's, that's often something that employers are willing to consider. So if they're giving you a bonus, you can ask for more. If they didn't offer you a bonus, you could ask to get one. Equity really depends on the company. We can help you with that if it's of interest. And the other thing that sometimes I advise students to ask for is an off-cycle review. So if they say that they do their performance reviews annually, which means that you'll be up for a raise every year, you can ask to have an off-cycle review at 6 months, which means that if you're performing your job well at 6 months, you'd like to be considered for a salary increase at that time. I've given that to people. I've seen students successfully negotiate that. So I think it's something that's definitely worth trying. Any questions? I've said a lot. Okay, so you all will have that handout. I'm going to jump back into the slides. Okay.
All right. So as you just saw in that handout, that the language that you use can absolutely be key, because you don't want to sound like you're being demanding, like I want this, someone else got this, so why can't I have this? It's more about you and showing your genuine excitement and your genuine interest, but also proving the point that you have the skill set or you have done the research, so that can lead into the flexibility. So the only thing preventing me from signing this offer is blank. I'd be more comfortable if the salary were closer to X amount of dollars. So again, main thing is that you're being considerate, because it's a two-way street, and you might be working with the person that you negotiate with. So you don't want to be on negative terms in that sense. All right, and again, just kind of reiterating some of the things that Kristin just said, turning down the offer by the deadline given. So again, just kind of following standard protocols, being respectful of other people and their time, because they're helping you through the process or being involved in the process, because you would want the same thing for you in return. So being grateful for their time, and even if it doesn't work out and you decline the offer, request to stay in touch, because maybe there might be another position in the future that stands out and they think of you, and they might reach out to you about that, or vice versa. And definitely connect with them on LinkedIn, again, to stay in touch, but also to see other opportunities that might come up of interest to you. If you're doing this decline over email, if you can follow up via phone, that is ideal, as we already mentioned. Sometimes, again, it's hard to pin people down, but as long as you have the trail, or you officially spoke with someone to decline, that's obviously important, that you're not ghosting them out either. But make sure that you're giving a reason, so that they can understand maybe how they can improve on their side. Or it could just be that there were two competing offers, one was closer to your family. It's not on them necessarily, so they might ask you tough follow-up questions, and that's okay. It's just part of their job. And they might have loved you as a fit, and they might ask you to reconsider. But if you made your choice, you accepted somewhere else, and you're happy with that, then perfect, you're happy with that. So don't feel pressured to be like, okay, I changed my mind by any means. All right. So we've given you a lot of resources and a lot of things to think about. So what questions do we have?
I'd like to ask how common, so you mentioned like a lot of these recruiters are kind of having these types of conversations all the time. How common is it to be interviewing with a company where maybe they are small and don't do that all the time? Like maybe recruiting isn't their main thing that they normally do?
So you mean if it's like a real small company and maybe you're like their third or fourth hire?
Yeah, or I guess in those types of situations where maybe they're not as savvy in these types of interactions. Yeah, that's where.
Yeah, I mean, so usually in companies that are that small, you might actually have an upper hand in negotiations. There's not going to be like hard and fast policies around, what they're able to offer beyond what they can afford, probably. They're not going to have to get approval from 5 people above them to do anything. So, I would go about it in the same way, but maybe just expect that it may be a little less formal on their end. But for, that's the company that I was kind of coming from. I was at a company that when I started was 7 people. So, yeah, I mean, we got creative in the way that we were able to attract employees. And oftentimes we offered things that we hadn't anticipated offering. But if someone asked for it and we really wanted them, we would try to make it happen.
Cool. Okay. So that can be more of a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree. Startups, smaller nonprofits can usually do what Kristin is mentioning, and they might not even have an HR department. So you could be literally talking to the CEO, which can be nerve-wracking for some folks, but at the same time, the fact that you have access to a high-level person in that organization can also be another value that you appreciate in that particular organization.
That makes sense. Thank you.
I have a question about negotiating with like any sort of remote job where I mean, I think the particular scenario I'm thinking of is with a lot more companies doing remote right now, but maybe not later. I'm like currently living in Pittsburgh. And so cost of living wise, a pay might be reasonable then, but then if they decide it needs to be like, now you have to come back in person. And so you have to relocate where the cost of living is higher later. What would you suggest for that? Does this mean you could like negotiate later? Like, well, now I have to move. And so I would like to be paid more to accommodate for that, or I don't know. What do you think?
So I do know that the companies who have a distributed workforce are typically paying employees based on the cost of living in that city. And so I would have that conversation up front and say, if we do return to office, which would require me to move to San Francisco, would it be possible to negotiate a higher salary at that point to account for the adjusted cost of living? I would try to get it in writing. I would try to do it over email so that you have a record of that. And even go so far as to saying, like, can you give me some idea of what that adjustment might look like? You could even throw out a number and say, if I were required to San Francisco, would it be possible that I could get a salary adjustment to whatever that is using the nerd cost of living calculator?
Thank you.
And I would think about too, like, if it says that it's going to be a fully remote position permanently, like, again, get that in writing and verify the fact that that will be the case.
So I'm going to put a couple other things in the chat for you while we're waiting for other questions. One is a link to a YouTube video that just is kind of a nice example of everything we've been talking about. So if you want more of this, you want something to watch while you're having your dinner, you can watch the actors act out exactly what we've taught you today. And then the other thing is a link to a LinkedIn learning course. we've been talking about negotiation in the context of job offers, which is great, but these skills, these negotiation skills, are really valuable in other parts of life as well. So when you get your job, you're going to eventually want to maybe negotiate for a raise. There are negotiations in your personal life. And so, Katie, you may know more about the course than I do. It was Katie's suggestion, but I think it's a good course for kind of taking these skills and expanding them.
Yeah, I think it's a perfect example of doing the research and being able to like anchor your decision, but also think about one thing we didn't talk about is like what is your best alternative if you don't get the yes you're looking for your first ask. It's okay to have a backup, as long as what is the absolute lowest that you will take or walk away. So have a couple options in mind and be ready to present those if your ideal situation doesn't work out.
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Awesome. Did we answer all the other previous questions from the beginning? Let's see. Oh, got a hand raised. Go ahead.
Thanks. So both of you talked about a little bit about how declining an offer over email may be preferable over doing it. Over the phone would be preferable. And I was wondering. Well, first of all, I'm assuming you wouldn't call people. So how should we go about scheduling that call? That's my first question. And the second one is, if we do that over the phone, is there a way for us to get some sort of proof or evidence that we did that step, that we actually declined the offer, so we don't get in trouble, and down the road, and the employer says that, hey, we never communicated that intention. I don't know if you've had run into any of those conversations with any clients.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I would say first and foremost, you can send an email to set up a time to chat about the offer, because typically they're waiting for a day for you to respond anyway. So if you're within that range, they're kind of expecting some type of communication from you. So you don't have to say I'm setting up a call, so I turned down your offer. but just a time to chat or review the offer. You can frame it in that way. But yeah, I haven't seen an instance where someone got in trouble for not having a documented version after a phone call when they've turned down an offer. Kristin, I don't know if you've ever seen that.
No, yeah, I don't think that happens very often.
Yeah.
If it does, we would tend to trust the student anyways. And so if you tell us, hey, I spoke to them on this day and I declined the offer. But yeah, I've never seen that happen. But just to be safe, you could always just send a follow-up email, letting them know, again, I appreciate you extending this offer to me. I enjoyed my interview process. I enjoyed meeting everyone. I'm sorry to have to decline, but I hope we can keep in touch.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, well, I know I've talked to a couple of you about offers that you sort of have pending. So there's some irons in the fire. That's exciting. And hopefully we can have more of these conversations as time progresses.
All right. Thank you all for jumping on tonight, and feel free to schedule an appointment if you do have any other questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night, everybody.